Namaskar viewers, hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I am Teena Jha with the news, our daily roundup of all that's making news across the globe. Let's begin with the headlines. Punjab needs new vision, Prime Minister Modi tells voters in Abohar. Former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh questions centre's policies. Mulayam Singh Yadav holds election rally in Mainpuri. Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla tells Bihar Assembly members at orientation program, your conduct is linked to the sanctity of the House. Karnataka hopeful of resolving the Hijab issue. Government says matter limited to only 8 high schools and pre-university colleges. Income Tax Department conducts searches at the premises of NSE's former MD and CEO and its group operating officer. And Western nations counter Russia's claim of troop pullback. Ukraine says Moscow is rotating contingents on the border. A quick run-through of some other events that made headlines. Government removes restrictions on operation of flights between India and Ukraine under air bubble arrangement. The Supreme Court sets aside High Court order on 75% quota in private sector jobs for Haryana residents. Prime Minister Modi to dedicate to the nation 2 additional railway lines connecting Thane and Diva in Mumbai on Friday. Plans to ensure uninterrupted 24/7 power supply to all households, says Renewable Energy Minister R.K. Singh. Over 174 crore 24 lakh COVID vaccine doses given so far. Recovery rate touches 98.03%. After 2 years of offline classes, Delhi University colleges reopened for all undergraduate, postgraduate courses. India warns UNSC on potential growth in terrorism and drug trafficking after recent developments in Afghanistan. 78 people killed in flash floods and landslides in Brazilian city of Petropolis. Team heads for South Africa to finalize modalities for first ever intercontinental translocation of a cheetah. The backbone of Indian cricket, Ranji Trophy, returns after 2 years in biosecure bubbles. Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla inaugurated an orientation program for members of Bihar Legislative Assembly and Legislative Council on Thursday. The Speaker reminded the members that in a democracy, the sanctity of the House is linked to their conduct and that the House is meant for dialogue and not planned disruptions. He also expressed concern over sloganeering and use of placards in the well of legislators. Referring to the digital Sansad app of Lok Sabha, Speaker Om Birla called upon legislatures of all states to work towards going digital. He also informed that the Lok Sabha is working in mission mode to bring information of all legislators on one platform.
आज जब हम आजादी का 75 वर्ष मना रहे हैं, अमृत महोत्सव मना रहे हैं, तो हमें एक चिंतन करने की आवश्यकता है, मनन करने की आवश्यकता है कि किस तरीके से हम लोकतांत्रिक संस्थाओं को और मजबूत करें और सशक्त करें। देश के अंदर संसद हो चाहे विधानमंडल हो, हमारी कोशिश होनी चाहिए कि एक जनप्रतिनिधि के नाते इन संस्थाओं को मजबूत करें, सशक्त करें, जनता की अपेक्षाएं आकांक्षा रखें और जनता की समस्याओं को संवेदनशील के साथ रखकर इन संस्थाओं को हम उनकी अपेक्षाओं को पूरा करने वाली संस्था बनाने का काम करें।
Addressing members in the Bihar Assembly on the occasion, Deputy Chairman of Rajya Sabha Harivansh said political parties should work towards ironing out differences during sessions through constructive debates.
अगर हम सब लोग इस पर आम सहमति बनाएं, इनको जाने, गहराई से अपनी परंपराओं को जाने और जो चीजें हमें इस विधायी संस्था को इफेक्टिव बनाने के लिए जरूरी है उनके बारे में जाने, तो शायद हम मिलकर के एक नए अध्याय की शुरुआत कर सकते हैं। दूसरा अनुभव मैंने पाया कि जब जरूरत हो अगर उस वक्त आप कानून पास नहीं करते तो उसका बड़ा हेवी कॉस्ट समाज को पे करना पड़ता है। यह मैंने 2-3 अनुभवों से ग्रहण किया जो मैं आपके सामने रखना चाहूंगा।
Moving on, the Karnataka government on Thursday expressed confidence in resolving the hijab controversy. Karnataka Primary and Secondary Education Minister B.C. Nagesh told the media in Bengaluru that the issue is limited to only in 8 high schools and pre-university colleges of the total 75,000 in the state. Remember, the High Court in an interim order last week restrained all students from wearing saffron shawls, scarves, hijab and any religious flag within the classroom. A look now at what's happening in other states. Delhi University started offline classes for all undergraduate and postgraduate courses from Thursday. After working online for almost 2 years due to COVID-19 pandemic, students were excited to be back in classes on college campuses. Class 12 exams of the Madhya Pradesh Board of Secondary Education started offline on Thursday for over 7 lakh students by following COVID-19 protocol. In the exams, they were not conducted physically in the last academic session due to the pandemic, and students were evaluated on the basis of their previous results and marks of internal tests. The Civil Aviation Ministry has removed the restrictions on the number of flights that can be operated between India and Ukraine under the current bilateral air bubble arrangement. This is being done to facilitate return of Indians from the Eastern European nation. Indian carriers have been asked to run more flights to Ukraine due to the prevailing tensions on its border. The Supreme Court, meanwhile, has set aside a Punjab and Haryana High Court order staying the state government's law on providing 75% reservation in private sector jobs for local candidates. It asked the High Court to decide on the matter within a month and has directed the government not to take any coercive steps against the employers for the time being. Candidates are using creative methods to seek votes in the Tamil Nadu urban local body elections. A candidate in Coimbatore dressed up as a king carrying a broomstick. The elections are slated to be held there on Saturday. Results will be announced next Tuesday. And news now from the 5 poll-bound states. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed a public meeting in Abohar, Punjab. He said the farmers of Punjab need a government that displays a new thinking and vision. Listen in.
पंजाब को आज एक ऐसी सरकार चाहिए जिसकी प्रेरणा राष्ट्रभक्ति हो, जिसकी प्रेरणा पंजाब का विकास हो। बीजेपी पूरे समर्पित भाव से पंजाब के लोगों के सामने पंजाब की सुरक्षा का संकल्प लेकर, पंजाब के विकास का संकल्प लेकर के आई है। डबल इंजन की सरकार कैसे पंजाब को तेज गति से आगे बढ़ाती है।
Former Prime Minister and Congress leader Dr. Manmohan Singh also addressed voters in Punjab through a video message in Punjabi. The state, remember, will go to polls on the 20th of February. Listen in to what Dr. Manmohan Singh had to say.
मौजूदा सरकार ਨੂੰ ਆਰਥਿਕਤਾ ਦੀ ਕੋਈ ਸਮਝ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੈ। ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਗਲਤ ਆਰਥਿਕ ਨੀਤੀਆਂ ਕਾਰਨ ਦੇਸ਼ ਆਰਥਿਕ ਮੰਦਹਾਲੀ ਦੀ ਜਕੜ ਵਿੱਚ ਫਸ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ। ਅੱਜ ਬੇਰੁਜ਼ਗਾਰੀ ਸਿਖਰ ਤੇ ਹੈ। ਕਿਸਾਨ, ਵਪਾਰੀ, ਵਿਦਿਆਰਥੀ, ਔਰਤਾਂ ਸਭ ਪਰੇਸ਼ਾਨ ਹਨ। ਦੇਸ਼ ਦੇ ਅੰਨਦਾਤਾ ਦਾਣੇ-ਦਾਣੇ ਦੇ ਮੁਹਤਾਜ ਹੋ ਰਹੇ ਹਨ।
Some more news and views from the election-bound states. Union Home Minister Amit Shah said the Samajwadi Party stood for Sampatti, accumulation of wealth, and Parivarvad, benefiting its own family. Shah told a gathering in Shikohabad that under an SP government in the state, 45 people from Akhilesh Yadav's family were holding various positions. In Jhansi, UP Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath reiterated his resolve to make the state riot-free and fear-free. He said the scheme of Har Ghar Nal is being implemented in Bundelkhand, and soon the Bundelkhand Expressway will also be completed. Samajwadi Party President Akhilesh Yadav told an election rally in Firozabad that his party will initiate a Samajwadi Thali for just 10 rupees. He said no poor person will have to sleep hungry if his government is formed in Uttar Pradesh. Defence Minister Rajnath Singh targeted Chief Minister Charanjit Singh Channi at a public meeting in Amritsar in Punjab, criticising his recent remarks on people from Bihar and UP. He said the Congress wants to gain power by dividing people. Congress General Secretary Priyanka Gandhi Vadra addressed a public meeting in Pathankot. Besides listing the achievements of Chief Minister Channi's government, she also claimed that the BJP and Aam Aadmi Party were outsiders in the state. Three councillors of the Congress's Amritsar unit, Priyanka Sharma, Mandeep Ahuja and Gurjeet Kaur, joined the Aam Aadmi Party in the presence of Delhi Deputy Chief Minister Manish Sisodia. Let's now turn towards business and economy. Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman on Thursday participated in the first G20 Finance Ministers and Central Bank Governors meeting under G20 Indonesia presidency. She underscored the need for an expeditious and equitable distribution of vaccines to aid global recovery. The finance ministers also shared insights on India's policy response to the pandemic and suggested that recovery measures have to be built around a long-term vision. Listen in. The Income Tax Department on Thursday conducted searches at the premises of former NSE MD and CEO Chitra Ramakrishna and Group Operating Officer Anand Subramanian in Mumbai as part of a tax evasion investigation against them. The searches are aimed to gather evidence on the charges of financial irregularities and alleged tax evasion. Ramakrishna hit the headlines after a recent SEBI order said she was guided by a yogi dwelling in the Himalayan ranges in the appointment of Anand Subramanian as the exchange's Group Operating Officer and advisor to the Managing Director. In some other business stories now, African Union leaders and their European Union counterparts are gathering for a summit meeting on Thursday and Friday. Trade cooperation between the two groups has thrown up a few economic success stories for Africa. Morocco's recent commercial growth has been aided by its close relations with the European Union. Its Tangier port at the mouth of the Mediterranean has become Africa's busiest port, largely thanks to trade deals with the EU. The European Union wants to boost large-scale spending on infrastructure, transport, technology and energy into Africa. Talks at the summit are also likely to focus on health and COVID-19 actions and also joint responses on combating jihadist extremism across Africa. Despite its fastest annual growth in 37 years, the US economy is bogged down by persistent shortage of the computer chips essential for technology. The US Commerce Department has called the situation alarming. The Biden administration is pressing Congress to pass a $52 billion funding aimed to ease the crisis. The problem has been building since pandemic-related lockdowns shut down major Asian chip factories 2 years ago. But with the end of the pandemic in sight, US technological companies are feeling the pinch despite global efforts to catch up with the demand. In Greece's rural heartland, tractors have become a symbol of anxiety. For weeks, they've been parked along the country's highways, their owners threatening to block traffic. Farmers are desperate for additional financial aid to cope with an energy crisis that's pushing up the price of food, fuel and fertilizer and has posed a sudden threat to their livelihoods. The effect high energy prices, which is driving decades-high inflation, is being felt across Europe and also around the world, piling financial stress on governments, households and businesses. And time for a short break here. On the other side, treatment of AIDS through stem cells. Details in just a while. Do stay with us. Thanks for staying with us. Let's now get you all the global news. Russia's claim that it is moving troops away from the border with Ukraine is being countered by America. Officials stated that 7,000 extra Russian troops have arrived in recent days. Russia has already amassed over 1 lakh troops near the border. Here's the latest report on the Russia-Ukraine crisis.
Claims and counterclaims on the Russia-Ukraine standoff. Russia says this footage is evidence of its troops' pullback from the Western Military District. The Russian Defense Ministry adds it will be moving more tanks and other military vehicles to their permanent bases. But Western nations are denying the claims. The US maintains that Russia could launch a false pretext to invade Ukraine at any moment. After a phone call to US President Joe Biden, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has said Russia must take real steps towards de-escalation. Satellite pictures released by Western nations show purported heightened military activity in Belarus. The images reportedly show military convoys, attack helicopters, and also the construction of a pontoon bridge over the Pripyat River in Brest rail yard. The Russian Foreign Ministry called the reports by the Western nations mass media of disinformation. It accused them of raising hysteria by distributing false information about a possible Russian invasion of Ukraine. On Wednesday, Ukrainians unfolded a 200-meter national flag in Kyiv Stadium to show their solidarity on the Day of National Unity declared by President Zelensky, who said they don't see any troop withdrawal yet. At a summit of NATO defense ministers in Brussels, NATO Secretary General Stoltenberg said the alliance was considering setting up new battle groups, the smallest type of self-sufficient military units in Central and Southeastern Europe. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
Meanwhile, in Canada, truckers and other protesters are maintaining their show of defiance, even as the police in Ottawa are telling them to leave the protest sites. Some of them even ripped up their police notices on the spot. The Ottawa police began handing out notices and threatening arrests on Wednesday near the Parliament building. Authorities are warning truck drivers that they could lose their licenses if they don't go now. 3 key cabinet members of the Canadian government have defended the use of the Emergencies Act to end the truck protest that has blocked several border crossings for weeks. They argued that it is starting to prove successful in getting protesters to give up and go home. The protesters, meanwhile, are decrying vaccine mandates for truckers and other COVID-19 precautions have jammed the streets of the capital since last January. The warnings from police come just days after Prime Minister Justin Trudeau gave authorities clearance to ban the blockades and tow away the trucks. In some other global updates, the Australian government has said it plans to end most of the country's COVID-19 restrictions on 5th March, though wearing masks will remain obligatory in some places. Chancellor Karl Nehammer announced the decision in Vienna. Officials stressed that the pandemic is not over yet, but a stabilization of new infections allows Austria to open up step by step. Austria recently became the first European country to enshrine obligatory vaccinations for most adults in law. From Saturday, proof of vaccination or recent recovery will no longer be required to attend events, go to restaurants, bars or hairdressers and various other activities. Foreign ministers from the Association of Southeast Asian Nations met in the Cambodian capital on Thursday for their annual conference. Not all foreign ministers were physically present during the meeting. Foreign ministers from Thailand and Brunei attended online, while Vietnam Foreign Minister Vo Tan Son attended virtually from his hotel room after he tested COVID positive upon arrival in Cambodia. Also absent was any representative from Myanmar, whose government announced last Monday that it will not participate in this week's meetings. Cambodia, the current ASEAN chair, said earlier this month there was no consensus on inviting the Myanmar foreign minister to the meetings. A magnitude 6.2 earthquake shook Guatemala on Wednesday, causing minor damage. The quake triggered some landslides that blocked highways and was felt in 18 of the 22 departments of Guatemala in southern Mexico and El Salvador. The US Geological Service said the earthquake struck near the country's Pacific coast just after 1 a.m. local time. It was centered near Nueva Concepcion and occurred at a depth of about 84 kilometers. It was also felt in southern Mexico and El Salvador. Time now for all that's happening in the world of science. A US patient with leukemia has become the first woman and the third person to date to be cured of HIV after receiving a stem cell transplant from a donor who was naturally resistant to the virus that causes AIDS. Here's a report.
A middle-aged woman of mixed race is the first case of cure for HIV through a stem plant. Her case was presented at the Conference on Retroviruses and Opportunistic Infections in Denver. The treatment involved using umbilical cord blood, a newer approach that may make the treatment available to more people. Since receiving the cord blood to treat her acute myeloid leukemia, a cancer that starts in blood, forming cells in the bone marrow, the woman has been in remission and free of the virus for 14 months, without the need for potent HIV treatments known as antiretroviral therapy. The cured patient is referred to as the New York patient since she was treated at New York Weill Cornell Medical Center in New York City. She was diagnosed with HIV in 2013 and leukemia in 2017. 2 prior cases occurred in males who received adult stem cells that are more frequently used in bone marrow transplants. But bone marrow transplants are not a viable strategy to cure most people living with HIV. Bureau Report, Sansad TV.
A Russian cargo ship launched successfully this week with a load of supplies for the International Space Station. The Progress MS-16 cargo ship blasted off from the Russia-leased Baikonur launch facility in Kazakhstan and reached a designated orbit en route to the station. It is carrying water, propellant and other supplies and is set to dock at the space outpost on Wednesday. The space outpost is now operated by a team of 3 astronauts from NASA, 1 from Japan and 2 astronauts from the Russian space agency Roscosmos. America's coastline is expected to see sea levels rise in the next 30 years by as much as they did in the entire 20th century, according to a report by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and 6 other US agencies. In the 20th century, seas along the Atlantic coast rose at the fastest clip in 2,000 years. By 2050, waves lapping against the US shore will be 10 to 12 inches higher. Experts said the costs will be high since much of the American economy and 40% population are along the coast. But the report says the worst of the long-term sea level rise from the melting of ice sheets in Antarctica and Greenland probably won't kick in until after 2100. NASA's Perseverance rover is marking 1 year of its landing on Mars. The rover is on a 2-year mission to explore the dry river delta and drilling into rocks that may hold evidence of life 3 billion to 4 billion years ago. The Perseverance rover landed near an ancient river delta in Jezero crater on 18th February 2021. 6 cameras were devoted to entry, descent and landing, looking up and down from different perspectives. All but 1 camera worked. Thousands of images beamed back the good condition of the rover. After the arrival, work started to teach Percy, as the rover is nicknamed, to do its work on the red planet. Percy uses its 7-foot, which is about 2-meter arm, to drill down and collect rock samples containing possible signs of microscopic life. NASA is teaming up with the European Space Agency to bring back the rocks by 2031. And time now for all the action from the world of sports. So let's begin with cricket today. Debutant leg spinner Ravi Bishnoi overcame a nervy start and then let rip his wrong arms to help India take a 1-0 lead in the 3-match T20I series against the West Indies. With Bishnoi's figures reading 2 for 17, India restricted West Indies to 157 for 7, despite Nicholas Puran's half-century. Skipper Rohit Sharma scored a quick-fire 40 off 19 balls, giving the hosts a solid platform for an easy chase. However, with Ishan Kishan, Virat Kohli and Rishabh Pant falling in quick succession, India were 114 for 4 in the 15th over. There were no more hiccups as Suryakumar Yadav and Venkatesh Iyer absorbed the pressure and sealed a 6-wicket victory. After shining in the Under-19 World Cup with a century against Australia and leading India to its 5th trophy, promising young batsman Yadav slammed a century on Ranji Trophy debut. India's premier domestic cricket tournament began today after a COVID-enforced gap. Playing for Delhi in the elite Group H tie against Tamil Nadu at the Barsapara Cricket Stadium, Guwahati, Dhul was sent to open the innings. He brought up his century of just 133 balls with the help of 16 boundaries. Now moving to football, Liverpool showed their ruthless edge in the Champions League once again as Jurgen Klopp, his side secured a 2-0 last 16 first leg win at Inter Milan. The Reds were far from their best at the San Siro, but they converted 2 key chances which came their way in the closing stages. Substitute Roberto Firmino broke the deadlock with 15 minutes to go as he cleverly headed home Andy Robertson's corner before Mo Salah popped up with his 24th goal of 2021-22 to seal a vital victory for Liverpool. And let's now get you to the tennis court. Former world number 1 Andy Murray suffered a brutal 6-0, 6-1 defeat by Spain's Roberto Bautista Agut in the second round of the Qatar Open. Murray, a champion twice at the event, never got anywhere near the form he showed the previous day in beating Japan's Taro Daniel, lasting little over an hour against the second seed. After getting blanked in the first set, Murray did hold serve at the start of the second set, but Bautista Agut reeled off the next 5 games to move into the quarterfinals. It was Murray's heaviest tour defeat since managing only 1 game against Roger Federer in the ATP finals in London back in 2014. Day 3 of the Badminton Asia Men's Team Championships 2022 at Shah Alam, Malaysia brought some good news for the young Indian men's team. With Lakshya Sen setting the mood for the tie with a stunning win, all the Indian shuttlers were close to winning almost every encounter. Eventually, Lakshya Sen, the doubles duo of Hariharan and Ruben Kumar, and Mithun Manjunath carried India to a 3-2 victory against Hong Kong. But before we close the bulletin, a relook at the headlines. Punjab needs new vision, Prime Minister tells voters in Abohar. Former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh questions centre's policies. Mulayam Singh Yadav holds election rally in Mainpuri. Lok Sabha Speaker Om Birla tells Bihar Assembly members at orientation program, your conduct is linked to the sanctity of the House. Karnataka hopeful of resolving hijab issue. Government says matter limited to only 8 high schools and pre-university colleges. Income Tax Department conducts searches at the premises of NSE's former MD and CEO and its group operating officer. And Western nations counter Russia's claim of troop pullback. Ukraine says Moscow is rotating contingents on the border. So that's it from us in this bulletin. Thanks very much for your time.